the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Playoff, because remember, I mean, you're not that far removed from being completely irrelevant. Now, to counter all of that, I'll say this. Josh Heupel's in at a time where he's got to find a counterpunch for his offense because of what we've seen the last 2 years. Because Hendon Hooker's not going to come walking through the door, right? Jalen Hyatt's not going to come walking back through the door. Teams have adjusted to how they play you. So how do you adjust? You know, is the fact that you were 94th in total
94th
offense?
in conference play in passing.
Okay, you're 94th in passing, yet you still won 10 games and got to the college football playoff. Now, does that mean you overachieved? You were better than what you achieved more than you should have achieved? Does that mean you're just a benefit of a schedule? Does that mean Josh Heupel's got real problems with his offense? Like, where does all of that factor in? Does it mean Josh Heupel did a better job coaching because they weren't elite on offense than he did maybe when they were elite? You know, all of those things you sort of look at. But what I see is it feels harder on offense right now. So how do you make it easier? And that's Josh Heupel's challenge.
Yeah. And I think that leads into this question here. And it's a true and false one I have for you, Brent. And it's Tim Banks and the defense makes it hard to fairly decipher where the Vols football program is right now under Heupel. Do you think that's true or false?
Hard to decipher why.
I think he's clouded things a little bit. And it kind of goes back to what you were just saying. And something I've seen is the last 4 years, because Heupel, like, he's an offensive coach. Like, the defense is the defense. William Inge, Rodney Garner, Willie Martinez, and Tim Banks, they're running the show on that side of the ball. They have raised the floor every single year. Like, you were 90, I think they were like 96 there that first year in scoring defense. They go up to 33rd, then to 22nd, and now they're borderline top 10 this past year. So the scoring defense is getting better and better every year. You allow one team all season this past year to score 20 points offensively against you. Like, they did their job all season long. The defense stepped up in so many different ways that gave this team a chance to win 10 games, make the CFP, that I think it kind of clouds where Tennessee is, because like Heupel's, he has the best winning percentage of any Tennessee head coach since Fulmer. But a lot of that for the last 2 years has been because the defense has picked up the slack. The defense is kind of the identity of Tennessee football right now. And you have an offensive-minded coach. Like, I think that's kind of where I'm saying is, like, is it true that Tim Banks has raised things so much? And it's good. And it's a testament to Heupel that he hired well on that side of the ball and has replaced guys well. When Brian John Marie goes to Michigan, he goes and gets William Inge, who is a co-DC and a great linebackers coach. And, like, he's doing well in the class. I'm really excited. I have a linebackers question for you. But Rodney Garner going out of the wheelhouse, things like that. That side of the ball has been really strong, and he deserves credit for that, because you look at it, could go way worse. And the people who in the offseason were like, I don't want Tim Banks. Like, I don't know what to tell you, Tim Banks is top 15 at the very least DC in the country. Like, a lot of teams would like to have Tim Banks right now. And he could have gone the Alex Grinch way. Remember, that set USC back by him going with Alex Grinch early on. And then he has D'Anton Lynn, the defense is making strides, but he's already lost a lot. He's already lost a lot of goodwill. We've seen coaches go the wrong way. Dan Mullen hiring Todd Grantham. That did not go well. And that eventually, like, there is some loyalty there that sometimes screws over these offensive coaches if they get the other side of the ball wrong that they're not as familiar with. Heupel deserves credit for going the right way in that regard, but it also clouds stuff, because Tennessee could win 10 games again next year, Brent, and the offense could still just be kind of, I don't know, because I think the scoring defense could be even better. They could be in the top 7. I'm really high in the linebackers. I think the James Pierce stuff is overblown. I think they're going to be just fine at edge in the Leo spot. I think there's a path where Tim Banks has raised the ceiling so high on the defensive side that it just gives the Heupel in this offense so much of a buffer that it's hard to decipher. Is there real problems with where Tennessee's going because you have an offensive-minded coach and the offense is just stuck in the mud, but the defense is so good that it doesn't really matter most weekends. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I guess in some, I mean, look, you give Tim Banks and his defensive staff credit for what they've built, and they've been able to hold together and build off of, which is, I mean, that's why they're where they are. It was the offense the first 2 years that carried, this program, and the defense is getting there. and has put themselves in a position to obviously win games. Here's the thing about the offense. I mean, they still scored. I mean, they still averaged pretty good, even though some of that, I know if you take out the throwaway games, the payday games, right? Then that skews the numbers and makes the numbers look bad. Well, how much better does that make your scoring defense look as well? And I mean, listen, I'm a stats guy. I'm a numbers guy. I've always been a numbers guy. But you can turn that stat into whatever it needs to be turned into. I think it also all goes hand in hand. And I think that's where – and I think Josh Heupel is aware of this, is trying to be very mindful of this because he is such an offensive guy. It can't be in your building, and it can't be your offense versus your defense. It's all got to go together. I mean, and so does the offense have to be better? Yes. Does the defensive success cloud where the program is? I'm going to answer no, because I think I can can separate the fact that the defense is growing and moving in the right direction, and they have to correct some things on offense for this team and this program to take that elite step that you're talking about. So I don't know if I'm answering that question. I think you got to be careful not to get into it's the offense versus the defense, because they are collaborative together. I mean, quite frankly, the offense in some ways this year helped Tim Banks' defense because they played more ball control. They ran the football more. There were fewer 30-second 3-and-outs and drives.
Yeah.
There were times Josh Heupel said, hey, Florida withstanding when he went for it on his own 28 or whatever that mess was. There were so many other times this year where he punted at midfield. And in 21 and 22, that was an automatic go for it. Hey, it's 4th and 8 at the 50. Well, we're going for it because we can't stop them anyway. So we're going to go. Now he's sitting there going, hey, let's punt it. Let's pin them inside the 5, and let's get a stop. And it worked really about all year long, with the exception of Arkansas. They had Arkansas backed up inside the 5 and gave up a rail route to the running back, or gave up a ball in the flat to the running back that let them out of jail. That was a huge play in that loss. But they played more field position. Josh Heupel played more conservative offensively this year in terms of playing the game that way, because he leaned on his defense a little bit more. Whereas in the first couple of years, they didn't lean on the defense at all. The defense is like, hey, you got to score 50 to give us a chance.
Yeah.
So it's got to go hand in hand. It can't be us against them. And I think Josh Heupel has to be very careful. I think that's why you saw Josh Heupel after the NC State game. Remember that quote where he's like, at Tennessee, we played defense too.
Yeah.
Well, that was hey, we're together. It's not just all about us offensively, because for 2 years it's been all about us offensively, and it's got to be about both if you're going to be a championship program.
I also think you have to throw in the Oklahoma game, because that to me was like, now looking back on the 24 season, that was the inflection point, I think, for the year for the offense, where look, they were banged up at tackle, but you saw like you had to go 12 personnel. Like it was fun 12 personnel against NC State, where your Stays and Kitzelman are getting open. You're like, oh, this is a new wrinkle. This is fun. But it wasn't a requirement to survive. In Norman, it was a requirement to survive. Was, hey, Nico's going to get his brains beat in if we're not going 12 personnel throughout. And then the rest of the year, it was just kind of like you had to live in 12 personnel. You had to be wary of what your tackles were doing all season long. You had to kind of adjust and play to your defense, because the protection wasn't going to be there, and the receivers were also a part of that, and they had a rough year outside of Thornton as well. But I think that is part of the reason that Heupel had to kind of lean right on the defense. It's like he didn't have a choice with the tackles being what they are.
No question. And they've got to, I mean, listen, that's what we're talking about for this, to use it in golfers' terms. If you're going to break 70, okay, you're a nice 80s golfer right now. If you're going to break 70 and be in the final grouping on Sunday, so to speak, then you have to fix some problem issues on offense. And what are those problem issues? Lack of explosives. Those numbers have dropped the last 2 years. They've gone down. Part of that's execution. There was some guys open this year. They missed them, in games. They dropped some balls. They've got to execute that better. schematically, they've got to do some things better to help there. And 2, they've got to score in the red zone. They've got to finish drives when they get inside the 35-yard line. And then obviously when they get on into the red zone, I mean, their numbers dramatically different. I mean, I think they were 50% was their touchdown percentage in SEC play when they were in the red zone. That's not good enough. I mean, you've got to score touchdowns when you're in there if you're going to upset Georgia, or you're going to beat Alabama on the road, or you're going to win at Florida. You can't go down there and kick field goals, or you can't get the ball to the 35-yard line and have a holding penalty and have to punt.
Unless you're killing it in the explosive touchdown game.
Yeah, but I mean, for the most part, and here's the other thing too. I mean, what have we learned the last 2 years? What are defenses going to do? They're going to try to make you drive it 10 plays. Because you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to play a lot of one-on-ones with the safety versus the slot and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our chances and let you throw it 70 yards. We're going to see if you can consistently do it for 12 plays and not make mistakes, not make a mistake to take yourself out of the – it's the NFL world. I mean, that's what the NFL teams are doing, right? And are trying to do. Now, there's still explosives in the NFL, but defensive coordinators, they're fine with you driving the ball 20 to 30, 20 to 40, right? How many times do we watch, do we hear Tony Romo on CBS going when the offense crosses the 50-yard line or the 40-yard line against the Chiefs, and how much talk is there about Spagnuolo now coming with exotic blitzes?
Yeah.
Here they come, and Tony's going into Tony world about all of that kind of stuff. I say that like we're long lost buddies, but you know what I mean. He gets on that tangent about that deal because that's where they get really exotic and kind of go crazy because they're okay with you driving it for the first 30 yards, first 40 yards. But then they get crazy there. So that's why you've got to finish because teams are not going to let Tennessee consistently do what they did in 22. I'm not saying 22 is this unicorn that can never remotely be close. You can never get close to that. I don't know that we're going to see a year where you are that explosive game in and game out, where it's like, okay, at what point in the first quarter does Jalen Hyatt get 10 yards behind somebody?
Yeah.
I just don't know that defenses are going to – they've seen this thing for 4 years. They've got a better handle on it. They're playing it differently. They're disguising the safety stuff. That's why Josh Heupel and his offensive staff have to have some counters to some things. What is that? Is it more tight end throws? Is it more backs out of the backfield? Is it more shallow crossing stuff and less deep crossing stuff? I don't know what the answer is. I'm not good enough as an offensive coach or a football guy to know what an offensive coach thinks he can do or can't do. But I just don't think you can sit there and go, okay, we're going to run a switch route and get a guy 5 yards wide open whenever we want to. And that's what it felt like in 22, which is the unicorn. I mean, that is the year that everybody's going, oh, when do we get LSU again? Where Jalen Hyatt, nobody even knew Jalen Hyatt was basically on the field.
Yeah.
Like Jalen Hyatt had, I don't know how many yards he ended up that day, but I bet 80% of his throws, there wasn't a defender in the TV screen when he caught the ball. That's just not going to, I mean, that's just not going to happen. Teams are going to defend you different. So what's your counter to it?
Yeah, I think that's all fair.
And the counter this year was run the football.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
but you're always going to have success. If you look at the last 4 years, they've averaged basically 5 yards per carry in all 4 years.
Because teams are also you get lighter boxes. Now they're doing the lighter box differently. Okay. So are you committed to running the ball? All right. Can you be more explosive in the run game? I don't know. I mean, what do you do? What do you do to find a counter win to some of those things, to ultimately getting more people in the box, to getting some of those matchups that you're looking for? And
Jalen Wright was that, right? 2 years ago, because Jalen Wright was a home run hitter. Like Jalen Wright, when he gets second level, he's gone. Like he saw that that was different. Like Jalen's your best back, and I love Dylan Sampson. Jalen Wright was your best back in the Heupel offense.
He was the most explosive back. Yeah. I don't know that he was the most productive all the time, but he was the most dangerous back.
Yes.
He's the guy that he could go to the house anywhere on the field.
And that's incredibly important in the Heupel offense, especially when the passing game and stuff. Like, it's just different. Like, those guys who can break it for 80 at a moment's notice. And I think they missed that. Like, I think Sampson was really good, but I think Jalen's just big home run threat. And he was just so good at staying up. Like, when he bounced off contact to keep it going, like, he was just... Jalen was... I can't say enough glowing things about Jalen. But switching gears here a little bit, Brent. The linebackers. I've been on this offseason where Tennessee got some bad luck with Keenan Peely with the injury stuff because I think that would have helped a lot, especially in the Georgia game, the Ohio State game in particular. I think having Keenan Peely in the middle of the field would have been helpful.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.